Evening everybody, and welcome to this week's Scan Pro Audio webcast. We're very pleased and privileged to be joined once again by the guys from Source Audio. We've got Andy and Alex, and they're going to be taking you through this wonderful array of knobs and twiddly things, which we know you love. Last week, we tried an experiment which worked very well, and it was this. For anyone that didn't see it, we had a special word, and if at the end of the webcast, you pick up on what that word is and email to us at scanproaudio@scan.co.uk. We will email you back with some rather super offers. So, without further ado, I think it's going to be Alex up first, and he's going to make some squidgy noises on this beautiful beast. So, I think we'll cut to titles and see you in a second.
Hi there, I'm Alex from Source Distribution. Thanks very much, Steve. We're the UK distributors for Moog. We have to say Moog. It's I know that in the UK, obviously, we've said Moog for a long time. Finally, now the internet's come around, we've been corrected. Bob always used to say Moog. Bob introduced himself as Moog, so I'm going to say that, and if I say it wrong, tell me. So we have a bunch of analog subtractive synthesizers around us. We've got three things. Unfortunately, we don't have some of the newer things that you would have seen announced at NAMM. Now, we just had the Sub 37 announced and the Theramini as well, which I think the Theremin's a really important instrument for Moog. That was what Bob first started producing. He produced kits for Theremins in 1953 when he first founded RA Moog. So the Theremin is like the heart and soul of Moog. It's like the original, Moog instrument. And so it's a hugely important part. Fortunately, we don't have it yet. Bear with us a couple of months. And they're shaping up to be very cool. And they address kind of the big thing with the Theremin, which is that if you've ever played with one, they're a real instrument, and they're not, I'll say, the easiest thing to get going. Well, they're very easy to make a sound, but to play one beautifully, and there are people who are incredible at playing a Theremin, it's a job. You know, you have to learn it, you have to spend the time with it. And the Theramini has pitch correction, like auto-tune, built into the device. And you can choose scales, so you can move your hand, and it gets around that issue that it makes it a lot easier to learn, it makes it a lot easier to play. And also the Theramini's got, it's actually a digital synth at its heart. It's based on the iPad Animoog app, Moog's app. And it's got tons of interesting sounds. It's got delay, it's got a little speaker, it has CV out as well, so we can use it to drive some of this stuff in really interesting ways. And it's shaping up to a totally awesome instrument. Hopefully the guys will have us back when we have it. The other thing, and hopefully can't miss because it's a beast, is the Sub 37. And this is obviously the it's a limited edition version of the Sub Phattys, which we have here, this beautiful thing. And it's intrinsically the same sonic blocks, but the Sub 37 is just like a bed of nails in terms of its controls. It's totally bristling with controls. And there's a lot of stuff that the Sub can do, which is kind of hidden in this. All of its sort of fundamental functions are here, but there's some extra stuff, which in the Sub 37, there are dedicated controls to do it. It also has more modulation options. It's really cool. It sounds, it's the same building blocks, but because it has more modulation, in a way, it kind of pushes the sound in a direction that the Sub Phatty can't quite do. Although, as we'll hear, the Sub Phatty sounds really damn good. So that's kind of what's new. We also have Minifoogers. We've got 4 of them. I'm afraid we don't have the magical 5th, which would be here. That's the delay. Very ironically, the delay is delayed. These are available now. Please check them out. The delay will be here hopefully soon. It might be a couple of months, I think. But we're very much looking forward to it. It sounds wicked. So let's play with synths. Initially, let's look at the Sub Phatty, and this is the most recent synth they released until these things arrive, hopefully in a couple of months. The Sub is an analog subtractive synth. It is it's a new synth. It's based, actually, in a way, it's based, I think, on some development that they did for the Minitaur. The Minitaur's a tiny, tiny wee synth. There's a lot of technology involved in shrinking things and making them very precise and very effective. The Minitaur sounds super fat despite being really small. And some of that DNA has found its way, I think, into the Phatty. It's a very precise synth, but it can sound very rude. So let's play. So at the moment, I just have it set up with a basic patch. And it's... It's a very rude sounding synth. It's actually different to the Slim Phatty in many ways. Like intrinsically, as we saw, it has some of the development that I think went into the Minitaur, which has found its way across, and that has an effect on the sound. But there's a couple of key things just to draw your attention to on the Sub Phatty, and then thus. One is that in the mixer section, all the functions go up to 12. So it's 2 louder than 10. They go up to 12, and it means that you're able to drive elements of the synth pre-filter. So you can, at this point, and it maybe help if I sort of zero this. I'll go activate panel. What I just did there, we were using a preset. I've now set it so it's using what the panel is calibrated to do, and if I do that. So here we're just hearing oscillator 1. And up to about here, it stays relatively clean, but it starts to drive into the filter at this point. There's a kind of squaring off. And if I use we're on the triangle here, so you can kind of hear it drives. We also have this thing called multi-drive, which is a post-filter drive. So the two in tandem just make this real fat kind of aging of the sound. So it's really important to point out, I mean, I'm going to be playing loads of super bassy stuff, but with like moderate settings you can get really pretty and beautiful sounds out of this thing, but it does excel. It's got this kind of grit and warmth and drive that I haven't quite seen in some of their other synths. It's great. So we have 2 oscillators. It's a 2 oscillator synth, and if I blend in the second oscillator, you can have this frequency tuning for the second oscillator. And it's kind of a geeky thing, but what's important to highlight is that once you've set a sort of frequency relationship between the 2 oscillators, it stays very consistent across the whole range. The sort of beat frequency, the way that when you have 2 oscillators which are beating together closely like that, and you can hear that kind of phasing relationship. That relationship is maintained across the entire range of the keyboard, which is a subtle thing. It's because it's got incredibly precise internal guts, but it still sounds rude doing it. So don't let precision be a byword for boring. It's not. So we've got the classic Moog ladder filter. We've got resonance. And that with loads of drive just sounds wonderful. We also have a sub-oscillator. Let me take out oscillator 2. That's just oscillator 1. Let's come up a bit. So we can blend in the sub-osc. And then remember, obviously all of these things have individual controls, and so we can do things like not drive oscillator 1, but drive the sub-oscillator. So you can do these kind of complex drive structures internally. It's rude. Then we have a modulation bus, so we can, like, I'm enjoying this. This is good. So let's let the LFO do that for us. And on a Moog, the standard thing is that you have to apply the modulation wheel for the modulation to occur. So now this LFO is controlling that filter for me. Different shapes. We can go very fast with the LFO. descending or unascending. We have a sample and hold, which is your classic old interpretation of what a computer was meant to sound like. Never heard a computer sound like this, but that's what they were meant to. And then we can use the filter. We have 2 envelope generators here. We've got a one for primarily dedicated for filter and one for the amplifier. And we can choose the filter envelope to affect something, and so I can choose if it affects the pitch, the filter, or the wave amount. And this is really cool because down here under the oscillators we have a sort of a kind of wave selector, and it's freely sweepable. You can, if I just play the thing, we've got a kind of triangle, saw, a square, and a kind of pulse width for the square. And there's no steps there, that's totally free, which is very cool. And I can modulate that, so I can go, hey, let's, like, if I change how that's set and the amount. This is very cool. We have a sync for the 2 oscillators, which means that this slavishly attaches itself to the other os. And then if you start modulating the wave amount, you get all these kind of crazy, sort of weird, odd kind of sounds happening. There's tons. Let me actually make this. Fun. We do have presets on this. You can see I've been using the Activate panel, but there are 16 presets in the sub. I should point out there is also a free VST editor and kind of librarian. Moog synths are based in the past and they're all analog synths, but they're all very modern in their implementation. They all send and receive MIDI. So all of these knobs, if you look on my Slim, you can see it's actually sending MIDI data from it sends data and it receives data. And as I say, if you register the sub, you get access to the VST editor for it. And that lets you load up this very, very nicely designed kind of plugin into your DAW. Also a standalone editor, which means that you can get access to some of the under-the-hood functions in a very convenient way. You can also use it as a preset librarian. So you can, while this has only 16 presets, which would be good for doing a show, if you want to have hundreds more, thousands and millions more, you just use the VST editor. And it's dead easy to use. And yeah, the VST editor means that you can also dump it into your session and save and recall sort of sounds on the sub as part of your track. So it's very, very cool used like that. And yeah, we have 4 banks here. These are the sort of various banks. And if I go bank 3, 1. Just as you would expect, playing through them, it's great. And that's kind of the sub. There is some connectivity on the side. We have control voltage ins and outs. You can send the sub Phatty analog pitch and gate. It obviously responds to 1 volt per octave. It also sends, I believe, there is an output, I believe, for the pitch and gate. I may have that wrong, but there's some CV connectivity on the side, so you can interface it, not to a crazy extent, but to a limited extent with your other gear. And there's also MIDI and obviously USB, which is how we use the editor. There are some under-the-hood stuff, or is some under-the-hood stuff, which we can activate. And this is the stuff that they put into the Sub 37 on the front panel. There's some interesting things we can do. We can actually have the envelopes become loopable, so that much like on the old EMS Synthy, they had these kind of awesome trapezoid looping envelopes, and it's a similar thing. When the envelope completes its cycle, it loops around again. You can almost use it a bit like an LFO. That implementation on the Sub 37 is taken like to its nth degree, and they're actually syncable. So you can do all these wonderful things with, you've got 2 modulation buses on the Sub 37. You can have synced envelopes, 2 modulation buses firing off all kinds of stuff. But you can still access looping envelopes. The way it's done, you can use the editor. It's probably the simplest way. So if you bear with me, I have a little cheat sheet this shows there's actually a sort of key combinations. You push this and then activate panel, and by pushing certain combinations you can get access to sort of hidden functions. If you're in the field, this is quite a useful thing, but it's just good to know that there's some stuff this does which may not be immediately obvious, so do check that out. But that's kind of the sub. It's a completely rude, wonderful sounding synth. It's very precise, but it's very gritty and fat. It's loads of fun. I recommend playing with one. Let us now come thither to the Minitaur. So Tom, if you can give me Minitaur, and then we'll... So this isn't actually the sub that we're hearing, this is this. The sub obviously sends MIDI. You know, I can actually use the knobs here and control the Minitaur, just like the sub. Although the Minitaur looks very basic, it's and it's a dead simple analog synth. It also has extensive MIDI implementation, so you've got an editor for the Minitaur as well, and that lets you manage presets and edit the thing, access hidden functions as well. Anyway, let's just actually play with it. So the Minitaur is just a dead simple two oscillator subtractive analog synth. It is incredibly fat. The Minitaur, these kind of originally in the 70s you had the Taurus 1 and then you had the Taurus 2. These were sort of these kind of floor mounted organ pedal synths, and the Taurus 1 and 2 both sounded, they were both quite different, especially the Taurus 1 was incredibly fat, ludicrously fat in fact, and catchable. If you can find one, they go for a lot of money now. We released the Taurus 3 not so long ago, and that was another foot pedal based synth, dead simple, but just sounds so rude. It's the classic mode ladder filter, although I do believe behind the scenes there's some slight subtle things. Also, the oscillator is kind of specific to the Taurus, and that stuff has been put into this and shrunk. So it's a bass synth first and foremost. And actually, it's an important limitation to note. It does only play up to a middle C. You can't actually play a full range with it. There's technical reasons for why that's possible, why that's not possible, but it's part of being true to the original device. That's just what it does. Although unlike the original device, which only had sawtooth waves, it does have square. So let's just play. This is it. We have two envelopes, so we have very simple AD, well they're sort of ADSs, but they do have a release control, which is this one. And if we blend in the second oscillator, got a bit of modulation. It's really simple, but it's just a super fat sounding synth. You have one kind of modulation bus, one LFO effectively, which is just sine wave. And if I do this, we'll apply it. You can apply that to the filter and to the... all kinds of crazy. But you can use it for a tiny little bit of kind of pitch sickness. It gives you a kind of Boards of Canada sound, and this thing does sound really beautiful. It's got it's very simple, you know, as you can see it's dead simple. It couldn't really be any simpler, but the intrinsic sound is just one that you'll eternally use in tracks. Like, if you need a fat bass, you go to the Minitaur, you get a fat bass. So here's the square, and then the original Taurus triangle. And then, yeah, you've got another oscillator. There is, round the back, we've got actually quite a bit of CV connectivity, so we can, you know, we can chuck voltages in to control the filter, so, you know, to control the modulation. There's tons of stuff we can do, and again, if we use the editor, it gives us access to hidden functions. One very cool thing that Moog did with the Minitaur was release what was called the Rev 2 update. And it added some hidden features, including, this one actually isn't updated, which is very bad of me, but I apologize. I'll tell you what it does. It adds presets into the actual hardware machine. So by holding glide and then the oscillator selection sort of buttons, you can bang through 100 presets. So you can actually store presets in the machine. It also opened up loads of interesting things you can do with control voltages, tons of cool stuff. So check that out. I think most Minitaurs do ship with that now. This is a demo unit, but it's an incredibly cool thing, and it's an incredibly cool synth. You know, currently the most affordable way to get the kind of Moog sound, and it's dead simple, but all of the sounds it makes are just beautiful. And it does have an audio input. You can filter stuff through it, use that lovely filter in different ways. Okay, so this, which I'm sure many of you know, the Slim Phatty. The Slim Phatty is the thinner version of the Little Phatty, which actually was discontinued. The Little Phatty was the last Moog synthesizer that Bob was directly involved with creating. Since he died in 2005, the Slim Phatty was introduced afterwards. And the Little Phatty's recently discontinued. I would be highly remiss if I didn't point out that we do, while we don't unfortunately have any Little Phattys left, we do have some purple and green ones, which are incredibly cool. Get your prints on. Please buy some of those. But the Slim Phatty still continues. And it's a 2-oscillator synth based on the Little Phatty's architecture, which in turn was inspired by the Model D and the Voyager, obviously, which came out in 2002. And the Slim Phatty's intrinsically different from these other synths, both in the way it works and a little bit in the way it sounds. One really important point to make is that in terms of presets, the Slim Phatty, it has 100 presets, and it's obviously very easy to move through them, and it has this LCD display. So a lot of guys who use the Slim Live, I know Orbital were using the Slim Live. It's for that reason, it's dead easy to store a ton of presets and be very clear about what you're using for a show. Obviously, it's got this kind of, what is going on here, you wonder? Or maybe you don't, but I'll tell you anyway, which is that it has this kind of shared control system. So you've got these 4 dials which share controls and are able to, basically, you see here in the filter, Tom, can I get this, just the Slim? That's that. There we go. I think so. Yeah. It has an on and off button here, which is quite useful. There's a headphone out round the back, so if you're on stage and you're like, is it actually this preset? You can turn off the output so you're not going to the PA system while you're just doing that. So you've got this shared kind of calibration system. Let me go up here. So the way it works is, let me just move this to the side. For example, if I want to control the filter cutoff, I just go here, and this says cutoff. And you can see there's this cool little LED which shows what the value is currently set to. The knob itself is currently pointing in this direction, but I've got it set to this kind of catch-up mode, where the 2 values kind of chase each other, and you go up and grab them, so you don't get a jump when you change the value. It's a really smooth way of controlling the synth. You can totally change that behavior. There's a number of different ways you can have it. You can have it so it snaps if you want. I prefer using it like that. But the really important point is that Moog had sort of pioneered this technology where the actual control itself doesn't step. It's very important to point out. There's no stair stepping, although it is it's a digital system that's storing the presets. It gives you what they call direct analog control. So for all intents and purposes, it's as analog as you can get, really. So it's kind of a similar architecture to the sub in a way. We have 2 oscillators. Let me just get this modulation off. We can change them like that. That one needs to come up and level. So that's just level control for oscillator 2. Make it quiet, make it loud. Sync them. And then we've got a nice filter. Which is, again, the Moog ladder filter. Currently in 4-pole mode. Though it is possible to change the poles and get a kind of smoother response. You can do that on the sub as well. In fact, with the sub, you can have 1, 2, 3, or 4 poles, which have a different sound, good for different stuff. The coolest thing on the Slim here is this overload. So the overload is like the classic Moog trick where you fed the output of the synth back into itself through the external input. And if I do this, slim. It's just fat. I really like the overload. I use it loads. I use it overloads. You have one modulation bus, so you can send the LFO to control. Maybe if we control the filter, you pick the filter here, you have the amount, and then you set the rate. Just cool, dead cool. And it has an arpeggiator built in. There's tons of stuff we can do. There's interesting stuff like micro tuning and stuff. If you want to get into that, it's possible to load up all these things. And it's been around for a long time. And there's loads of wicked presets that you can find online. The guys from Orbital did a preset bank as well. You can download those, listen to Phil and Paul's presets. Very cool. It's just a fabulous 2-oscillator synth, and it's totally tiny and small. It also has CV connectivity around the back, so in the same ways as these can, it can totally interface with other gear. So it's just a fabulous, awesome, kind of full range thing, and that's an important point. This isn't full range, this is full range. But they have a different kind of feel, and depending on what you want, you know, one may suit, you may prefer the other. And then, of course, we've got the beautiful sub, and then we will have the sub 37 and the Theremin for you soon, I promise. So that is enough from me. And what I'll do is I'll get my colleague Andy to come. And Andy, come and talk about Minifoogers and all the wonderment that will bring for you.
Hi, I'm Andy from Source Distribution, and I'm here to talk to you about Minifoogers. So thank you to Alex, who certainly knows his onions when it comes to synths. So I'm here to talk to you about the new Minifoogers by Moog. Okay, so the Minifoogers are kind of the next step on from their bigger brothers. But these, you'll notice, are much more pedalboard friendly. And one of the main things about these guys are true analog circuits. So if you've ever come across any of the Moog circuits, played any of the synths, you know exactly what you're going to get. Fat, vibe, and as Alex said, they're just mean, they're rude. So we've got 4 of the 5 pedals, so obviously mission of the delay, unfortunately, but that will be winging its way to us shortly. So one of the main things about these pedals is an inherent darkness, which I think is missing from a lot of modern pedals. I think, especially in the YouTube age, it's very much been about boutique pedals that are very pristine. These, although they have true bypass, which is pretty much it nowadays, we're kind of pretty much brought up on that. These have a character and a vibe that adds just something I think has been sorely missed from a lot of guitar pedals recently. So, what have we got? We've got the MF Boost to begin with. So, boost pedals, there's a lot of talk online, a lot of talk with guitarists about boost pedals. What do they actually do? I think in its crudest form, we can absolutely use it as a solo boost. Okay, so we've got a rhythm tone, and with everything kind of cranked up, we can just increase the level and boost that over our original signal for a solo. Where proper quality boost pedals differ is they will add a certain character, fatness to your tone. So if you're going into a valve amp, you can push that front end and give you something to lean against, kind of a bit of a buoyancy, which is really, really useful and helps you kind of really dig into an amp. So this is the guitar kind of going clean, kind of a little bit, kind of anemic almost, kind of doesn't really sustain. But once you kind of introduce a boost pedal, you've got something to lean against, and it's as much a feel thing as it is a tonal thing. We've also got a tone control on this particular boost pedal, which allows us. So So if I go into a single coil sound, you can really kind of warm it up and give myself something to lean into. Say if I'm playing a darker jazz guitar, we can obviously boost that tone and get ourselves a brighter tone. So if I move on to a neck pickup, very, very, very usable. With this kind of secret sauce with a lot of these, well, with all of these Moog pedals, is the addition of an expression input. Now, one thing that's kind of key with the design of these circuits is the tone controls, the level controls, all in with each other. So you've got these circuits that, on the surface, look very, very basic, but underneath there's a lot of clever stuff going on. So a case in point being with this boost pedal is if we introduce an expression pedal into this input here, we've actually got the ability to go past where the level control is and get an extra gain boost. So what this allows us to do is on lower settings, we can use the pedal as kind of a volume pedal. So we can get all these kind of 4 pedal steel tricks. If we go further up, we actually go past that potentiometer when we reach the end of the travel of that pedal. So we've got a huge amount of gain on tap. So we can really push the front end of a valve amp. Again, just giving you more character. Moving on to the MF drive. Now this is a really interesting pedal. Again, keep mentioning that inherent darkness with a lot of these pedals. If you go into a lot of fuzz pedals with, say, a Strat or a Telecaster, usually they'll tear your head off because they're overly bright, they're overly aggressive, especially a lot of germanium ones. The FET and the OAT circuits in this, and the amplifiers kind of round that out. So they give you something, again, to lean into, something that's buoyant, something that's kind of makes you want to go after it and attack it. Where a lot of times you plug a Strat or a Tele into say a Fender amp with a fuzz pedal, and it's really unusable, it's really uncomfortable to play. Whereas with this, that roundness really allows you to attack it. So the controls on the pedal itself, we've got a gain, which controls the level going into the FET. We've also got a drive circuit. Again, an additional gain stage once we kind of put that in. It takes us from about 16 dB up to 57 dB in terms of range. Loads of gain on tap to really drive the front end of an amp and also kind of clip it from the front end. The characteristics of a FET is quite aggressive. The OTA also gives us this kind of meanness and this anger. So if I go to a quick setting with the drive engaged, got a clean sound. Engage this. And if you've ever gone into the front end of a plexi with a fuzz pedal, you get this feeling where the bottom end really starts to drop out, and you get that spluttering kind of Hendrix machine gun thing. Okay. Secondly, we've got the output, which controls the output level going into the amp. Now the tone control, I talked before about these circuits being quite intricate and a lot of secret stuff kind of going on under the hood. With a lot of tone controls, it's basically, we'll make the pedal bright so it cuts your head off, and then we'll make it uber dull. What this actually does is we've got 3 separate EQs, if you like, built into this tone control. All the way to the left is a low pass filter, so we can really kind of take some of that high end out of it. As we move to the center position, you get this kind of scoop tone. It takes about 6 dB out at about 800 hertz. It's a little bit more focused, a lot more kind of American sounding. And as we move further around to the treble, it actually engages a high pass filter. So to its extreme, we scoop all the low end out, and as we come back around, we bring some of that low end in. So depending on what guitar you're using, what amp you're using, you've got loads of ways in which you can control that tone and really sculpt the sound to make it what you want. One of the sounds that this is great for is that kind of real dark 60s fuzz tone. Something like... And kind of going into an amp just allows you to sustain. And there's not a lot of pedals that give you, again, that aggression, that sustain, and that kind of that tightness. One of the other main additions to this pedal, which is kind of giving it a lot of interest online, is the addition of a ladder filter. So Alex touched on it briefly before. The ladder filter is a 4-pole filter that made incredibly famous by its use in Moog synths. And to have that, to access that as a guitarist, opens up a whole new world of possibilities. So this kind of blurs the line of what guitarists and synth players kind of do. There's always a bit of a separation between the two. But this now allows you to be able to control the amount of high end that's in your signal. So we can get these really filthy dark tones. And as we reduce it, it just kind of opens up and gives us that high end. This also interacts heavily with the tone control. So if we start to bring that down, got this filthy low end. So if you combine that, if you've ever heard any stuff by Royal Blood, you've got this kind of combination of guitar and bass together, and you can kind of get that pseudo guitar bass thing happening with this. So very, very, very cool. Next protocol is the peak switch. Now what this does, it adds a 15 dB boost at the filter cutoff point, which acts as kind of like a mid-top boost depending on set that cutoff frequency. And again, we can dial that in with the tone controller. And the final thing with this is the expression input. So what I've got on the floor is a Moog EP3 pedal going straight into there, and then what that will adjust is the actual filter cutoff. So I've got the ability now. One incredible thing that we can do with this is if we take the peak in, bring the filter right down, turn the tone all the way up, we've now got ourselves a wah, pseudo half-cocked, dirty, filthy and with that filter control, we can just dial that in and pick that sweet spot we want. Very, very cool. So there's tons and tons of stuff we can do with that pedal. Moving on to the MF Trem. And this essentially is Tarantino in a box. It's one of those dark, filthy, filthy trems that you listen to an old Fender amp like a Tremolux or something like that. You've got this uber soft Opto trem going. And what it does incredibly well, just super, super dark. Very, very cool. Very, very, very cool. Again, not an average trem because the controls don't do exactly what they say on the top. There's a lot of clever stuff going on underneath. So if we take the shape control to begin with, in its center position you get this kind of classic rise and fall that you kind of expect from a kind of an old school trem. As we bring it all the way to the left, you get this kind of hard impact when you kind of soft decay. bring it round to the right. We've got this kind of smooth lift and hard drop off. So at any point in between, we can control the characteristics of this trem. So it's not just an up-door trem or kind of a brick wall trem. You've got all of these colours in between. Moving on to the tone control. This only affects the tone of the tremolo. Now, one thing with tone controls on normal trems is it's very difficult to get it to cut through. You've got the tone you want from the guitar, but actually getting that stutter or that tremolo to kind of push through the mix is really difficult. What we've got here is we can just brighten the effect, or we can dull the effect. And it's like a subtle depth control almost with the trem. All the way to the top, the dry signal and the tremolo signal is affected. Very, very cool. The speed does exactly what it says it does. So it's fast stutters, around a kind of more of a pulse. If we lower the shape and lower the speed, and increase the depth a bit, you can kind of get pseudo univibe tones out of it. Very, very cool. So again, digging a little bit deeper under the hood and understanding the signal flow of the pedal and what the individual parameters do, you can get a lot of mileage out of these pedals. And one of the final sounds that it does incredibly well is just a nice hard tremolo. So exactly what you want out of a trem. It's controllable, but it also goes dark and goes a bit weird when you want it to. Finally, the MF ring. Now, I've got a bit of a love-hate relationship with ring modulators because I never quite know where to start with them, because you kind of feed a guitar in, they kind of go off on a tangent, and it's very, very difficult to get them to play in the key of the song that you're working in. What the MF ring allows you to do is choose your center frequency, and it will track in the key that you're in. So if we pick key of E, we can get towards the bottom of the treble kind of some wicked kind of low octave stuff. Pair that with the mix control, obviously our full drive signal, bring the mix in, and we can get it, kind of start adding those some in different tones and all those kind of those rings because that are coming in. Again, start to increase the frequency. Start to get your usual ring modulation tones in it. All the kind of bleeps and bloops that you'd expect. One of the final things with it, again, we start to add in an EP3. And this just starts to freak out. It's wicked. So the EP3 is controlling the frequency. So again, start to pick our center frequency, and now we've got control over with our feet. Start to introduce other pedals in. Now this is where these pedals start to come together. You start adding them. And now the kind of lines between a synth player and a guitarist get blurred pretty quickly. So add the MF delay into that, and you've got a huge palette of colours to play with, and it's pretty rude with what you can get away with. So at this point, we'll kind of move on to any questions. I'd like to invite Alex back in, see if there's anything that's synth related.
We don't seem to have many questions from the chat room, which I always say is a good sign that you've covered everything. I just want to say something in case anyone asks about those genuinely beautiful wooden sides to your little Moog there.
Good point.
Are you referring to Alex's cheeks?
Yeah.
My cheeks.
To his burn.
But sir, my cheeks are not included. Yeah, you have to pay more for them. Yeah, it's a good point. When you buy a Slim Phatty, unfortunately, you don't get these awesome wooden cheeks with it. It looks wicked on its own, but yeah, you have to buy them separately. It's a separate thing. You can also buy rack ears for it too, so you can rack that. That's an option.
Thanks to you two. We're going to run some titles, and I'll come and join you, and we'll speak a little bit more about the word. So for now, thank you to both of you, and titles. So, thank you once again to Alex and Andy. That was splendid. Lots of squelchy noises, which we know you love. I'm going to say this word that I found here. Well, what is that word, Andy? Can you say that there?
I don't know, I can't read that. That would be subtractive.
What was that again, Alex?
That was subtractive.
Oh, was that Tom?
Subtractive.
Anybody over here see what that? Subtractive. So if, just by chance throughout today's demonstration and webcast, you picked up on a word that might be our special word of the evening, and you were to email us that word, we would, by return email, send you some special offers about this very wonderful stuff. Was it subtractive? Was the word I heard somewhere?
Got the feeling.
Anyway, thank you very much. Oh, the email, sorry, I did say it at the beginning, but I'll say it again. If you email scanproaudio@scan.co.uk, we will, by return, send you some very special offers indeed. It remains for me only to say once again, in all seriousness, thanks to these two, they're brilliant demonstrators, to Andy and to Alex, to Source Audio for sending the guys over. What have we got next week, Tom? Ableton with our very own Simon Lyon. So until then, thanks for watching, do appreciate it, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, bye-bye.